have revealed a far more luxuriant tree, however, one abounding with branches and twigs that eventually petered out. In fact, a new species called Homo naledi, as yet undated, was announced just last year. This newfound diversity paints a much more interesting picture of our origins, but makes sorting our ancestors from the evolutionary dead ends all the more challenging. As paleoanthropologist Bernard Wood explains in the article that follows, Homo ergaster is also known as African Homo erectus. In this arrangement, H. erectus refers to fossils from Asia. Originally published Scientific American 311, Volume 3, 40-41, September 2014. Welcome to the Family by Bernard Wood. So what do you think? Said Lee Berger. He had just opened the lids of two big wood boxes, each containing the carefully laid out fossilized bones of a human-like skeleton from Malapa, South Africa. These two individuals, who had drawn their last breath 2 million years ago, had created quite a stir. Most fossils are isolated finds, a jawbone here, a foot bone there. Scientists then have to figure out whether the pieces belong to the same individual. Think of walking down the highway and finding parts of cars, a broken fender here, part of a transmission there. Do they belong to the same model or even make of car? Or might they not have come from a car at all, but from a pickup? In contrast, the skeletons from Malapa, though not complete, are intact enough to reduce the possibility of random commingling. Like Lucy, unearthed in Ethiopia in 1974, and the Turkana boy, found in Kenya in 1984, they have so much more to say than individual fossils. But they had made the headlines not because they are complete and so well preserved, but because Berger, a paleoanthropologist at the University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, has suggested that the individuals were part of a population that was directly ancestral to our own genus, Homo. We all have ancestors. I still have an aged living parent. I had the good fortune to have known all 4 of my grandparents, and I can even dimly remember 3 of my great-grandparents. But I also have close relatives who are not ancestors. Not many. My father and I were both only children, but I did have a couple of uncles and aunts. They are an essential part of the family tree of their descendants. But in terms of my family tree, they are the equivalent of optional extras on an automobile. So Berger wanted me to stop admiring the details of the teeth and jaws and tell him if I thought the Malapa skeletons were the evolutionary equivalent of my parents and grandparents or of my uncles and aunts. In other words, did they belong to a population that was a direct ancestor or just a close relative of modern humans? When I first started studying human fossils in East Africa nearly 50 years ago, the conventional wisdom was that almost all of our extinct close relatives were direct ancestors, and as you went further and further back into the past, each was less human-like and more ape-like. But we now know from genetic studies and from fossil evidence of the Neanderthals and the so-called Hobbit of Flores, Indonesia, Homo floresiensis, that our direct ancestors shared the planet over the past few 100,000 years with several of our close relatives. Furthermore, other fossil discoveries make it clear that much earlier in our prehistory, 4 million to 1 million years ago, there were also periods when our ancestors and several close relatives walked the earth at the same time. The presence of multiple evolutionary branches at any one time makes it much more difficult to identify direct ancestors of modern humans than paleontologists anticipated even 20 years ago. Yet the challenge also means that the story of human evolution is far more intricate and fascinating than most of us realized.